Hello and welcome back to another episode of Colorado Politicking. I'm your host, Pat Poblete. I'm a legislative reporter with Colorado Politics, and we are kicking things off this week on the campaign trail. So we're going to bring in political correspondent Ernest Luning. Ernest, what have you got for us?
Well, Pat, this week, the political world is kind of grappling with a new congressional redistricting map that came out late Friday, and it's the first one that reflects current census numbers and all the testimony that the Independent Redistricting Commission has been hearing all around the state for the last month and a half or so. And it had a couple of big surprises in it. There's a southern district, which is supposed to concentrate some Latino influence, which could be kind of a departure from the way that the state has been divided, which with a western district and an eastern district. Now there's a northwestern district, a southern district, and an eastern district, and then all the other districts on the Front Range where all the population is in the state. But the big surprise was that two incumbents, Lauren Boebert, the Republican from the Western Slope, and Joe Neguse, the Democrat from Boulder County, were drawn into the same district. And interestingly, I did some research. That's never happened before. Colorado incumbents have never been drawn into the same district in a congressional redistricting situation. So it was interesting to see how the two candidates and their supporters kind of ran with it. They both treated it as something that might actually happen, though it's not going to, and both tried to make hay with it. Boebert claimed that the Democrats wanted to get her out of office so bad they were drawing her into a district that contained Boulder. And Neguse has sent out looks like a half dozen fundraising appeals saying, look who we may be facing next time. Lauren Boebert, who has a million followers on Twitter and can raise thousands of dollars with a single tweet. It looks like they're not going to be running against each other. Lauren Boebert said today, just before midnight this morning, she said, listen, I'm going to run in the 3rd congressional district, not the 2nd. To do that, she would just have to move about 30 miles down the road into the old Western Slope district. So that's what's going to happen, no matter how the lines finally fall. But for a little while, it looked like two of the state's brightest stars might be facing each other next year's election.
So, Ernest, that naturally sucks up a lot of the proverbial oxygen in the room. But sticking on the campaign trail, there was probably a slightly less covered development this week when it comes to a potential GOP challenger for Democratic Secretary of State Jena Griswold. What can you tell us about that?
Well, we had Rose Pugliese, who has been a Mesa County commissioner out in Grand Junction for a couple of terms, has been positioning herself as a challenger to Jena Griswold for Secretary of State next year. And what's interesting is Rose tweeted last night that she's not going to do it. She has family considerations, and all the rumors about her running for something are unfounded, and basically took herself out of the running. Where that leaves the Republicans, though, is in kind of a sticky situation, because I've talked to a bunch of Republican consultants and leading Republicans, and they don't have anyone else to challenge Griswold. That's going to be a real important race, because that's at the center. Secretary of State runs elections in Colorado, and that's at the center of basically all of the partisan controversy since the election over election fraud and things like that.
So, Ernest, where does that leave Republicans?
It leaves them in a difficult situation, because not only is there no one else who's been running for Secretary of State, or it appears ready to step up, they don't have a candidate for any of the other statewide offices except for governor. And for governor, we've got Heidi Ganahl, who's the CU Board of Regents member at large. She's the last Republican elected statewide in Colorado. She's going to be announcing her campaign for governor next week, finally. And She'll be joining Greg Lopez, who is more of kind of a Tea Party candidate, running on a shoestring. He's been running for a while, though don't know whether he's got much of a chance at the nomination. But we've also got other statewide offices up next year that are all held by incumbent Democrats. We've got Attorney General Phil Weiser, State Treasurer Dave Young, and Jenna Griswold, the Secretary of State. And so far, the Republicans don't have candidates for any of those offices. So, the phones are going to be burning up over the next couple of weeks between Republicans trying to see who's willing to take any of those Democratic incumbents on.
Well, Ernest, your phone is always burning up when it comes to covering the campaign trail, which you do an excellent job of. And speaking of excellent reporters, let's turn to judicial reporter Michael Karlik. Michael, the state Supreme Court's coming back next week, right? What should we be expecting?
Well, that's correct, Pat. The justices are coming back from their vacation, and they have scheduled some major cases for oral argument right off the bat. There are three in particular that I will be watching next week, and the first involves the state's DUI laws. Now, in Colorado, driving under the influence is a misdemeanor, but after a person has 3 misdemeanors, DUI becomes a felony with harsher punishments. Now, the Supreme Court last year clarified that for felony DUIs, prosecutors have to prove to the jury that a person has at least 3 drunk driving convictions. It's not just something that the judge can check off before imposing that harsher punishment. Now, that sent a lot of DUI convictions back to the trial courts to correct that mistake. But in Jefferson County, the district attorney attempted to prosecute one man again for a felony conviction, according to this new procedure. Now, the Supreme Court did not answer the first time whether that second prosecution violates double jeopardy. So they've taken up the case of People v. Viborg to address that very question. Now, there's another case I'll be watching out of Mesa County called People v. Johnson. After police handcuffed Mr. Johnson, he refused to walk with them to the patrol car, so they had to carry him. He was charged with resisting arrest, but he says it's not legal for police to charge him based on his conduct after they arrested him. The government, on the other hand, says Johnson wasn't necessarily under arrest at the time he was in handcuffs, and that someone may not be under arrest until they are in the patrol car. So the Supreme Court will interpret what that means for the sake of charging someone. Now, finally, there's a case out of Denver involving something called a Batson challenge. Now, that's named for the Supreme Court decision in Batson v. Kentucky, which found that prosecutors cannot excuse people from serving on a jury based on their race. Now, in this instance, People v. Ojeda, the Court of Appeals found that prosecution indeed did that, dismissing a Hispanic man from the jury. It was likely a violation. Now, Batson cases are rare, and for the Supreme Court to hear it is even rarer. So the justices will weigh in about whether the Court of Appeals got it right. Oral arguments start on Tuesday at 9.
Well, thank you, Michael, and we look forward to seeing all of your coverage on those stories and more in the coming weeks. And for Ernest's coverage, you can also log on to coloradopolitics.com, see the latest from the campaign trail. Now, for those two, and for myself, Pat Poblete, thank you so much for joining us, and we will see you again soon.